As I'm sure many of you guys already know by now, life in the UK is pretty expensive. With the rising costs of the single tax, it's really important that us singletons know how to mitigate the costs of being single. Because of this, I'm joined with Bobby Seagull, a maths teacher, TV presenter, and author, to share some tips and tricks on how we can navigate single life. Hello, Bobby. How are you?
I'm delighted to be here. Every time, since we first met at the Bank of England, of all places, I was like, I like this lady's energy. So I was like, yeah. As soon as you asked me to join the podcast, I'm like, sign me on.
Thank you so much, Bobby. I'm very excited to have you on the podcast. I'm even more excited because you brought your book here, which I am very excited to read and check out. But yeah, for those listening, please introduce yourself.
So I am Mr. Seagull, as my students would call me. Professionally, I'm a maths teacher, but obviously outside of that, I have a broadcast media career as a author, as you kindly demonstrated in my book. I'm also a journalist. I write ad hoc on personal finance for the Financial Times and the I newspaper, and I'm on television both as a broadcaster, presenter, but also in a strange way as a reality personality as well.
You are everywhere. How do you do it all, please?
Have you seen Harry Potter with the Hermione Granger with the time turner?
Yes.
I've got a separate version of me, and I'm no.
Please share. I want one.
I think my philosophy has always been to say yes to things, and then worry about the consequences later.
No, I love that. And like you said, you're here, there, and everywhere. You're very, very busy. So how did you get to where you're at today?
So excellent question, and it helps me to trace my journey.
Yeah.
So in my 20s, any numerate mathematical graduate back in the mid-2000s, they were drawn towards banking. So I started out as a trader at the American investment bank, Lehman Brothers.
Oh.
And if anyone knows their economic histories, it's now actually becoming a bit of history rather than the present. Lehman Brothers unfortunately collapsed.
Yep.
Not my fault. Although I did at one stage trade collateralized debt obligations, so yeah, maybe it was my fault. Then I moved on to a Japanese bank called Nomura as a trader for a short while, but I made a little sideways switcheroo, as my Aussie friends would call it, and I moved to PwC and qualified as a chartered accountant. And actually, Indian families, my dad actually, I've done many things in my career, but that's probably the thing he's still most proud of, because Indian families, and probably your family West African.
Yes.
Yeah, so I think that doctor's always going to be high up. Doctor, lawyer, engineer, but chartered accountant is close to being a bronze medal in some families.
Yep.
So my dad's very happy about that. And then when I was 30, I took a sabbatical and I taught new graduates at PwC. So these aren't children, they're 21, 22, and I love the teaching. And I found I came to life. And while I enjoyed my corporate work, I thought, actually, this is my vocation. This is my calling. So I took from six figures to becoming a teacher. I did my teacher training, my master's, I was just starting my doctorate at Cambridge. And this is where I was the head of department in a state school in London, doing my master's. I went on a quiz show that UK listeners will know called University Challenge.
Yes.
My team didn't win. We actually lost in the semi-final, but I ended up going viral for my enthusiasm for knowledge. I remember the BBC did a tweet. There were loads of tweets and trending on social media, but the BBC said, "Is this the happiest ever contestant in the University Challenge?" And people were like, "Yeah, it was just incredible." And after that season, my friend Eric Monkman, whose team defeated myself, I think it was the most watched match of that quiz show in the 21st century, with the likes of Stephen Fry, Louis Theroux tweeting about it. Even CBBC characters, Hacker the dog, saying, "Are you Team Monkman or Team Seagull?" And on the back of that, we were invited to the One Show, Good Morning Britain, BBC Breakfast, and I was given a road trip show on the BBC. Channel 4 got to host a quiz show, and I ended up getting into reality television as well. I'm like, I'm a maths teacher, what's happening? I was on Celebrity Hunt, an escape reality show. I was on a dancing show, Dirty Dancing, a BBC religious show, Pilgrimage, and in fact I was on a Netflix dating show, Indian Matchmaking, which brings us back to today's ultimate topic, I guess.
So yeah, like I said, guys, he's definitely one of the busiest people I've ever met, in terms of the fact that when I see you on social media, you're either in Manchester, you're in London, you're on radio, you're on TV, and you know what? I'm here for it because you managed to balance it all whilst also giving back to charity, and I absolutely love that. So yeah, I'm very excited to chat to you today on the podcast because we're here to discuss single life. But before we delve into it, I've got two quick fire questions to warm you up in the hot seat. Are you ready?
Yes, ready.
So my first question, Bobby, to you would be, what's your greatest financial achievement?
So I'm going to go back to my childhood. So I grew up, my parents are from South India. In Kerala, moved to Britain in the late 70s. So I grew up on a council estate in East London, went to my local comprehensive till 16, good state school.
Yeah.
And I got a scholarship for my A-levels to Eton College, a full scholarship, which is probably now worth equivalent of 120K. So that is like a lot of money. Obviously, like my parents would never send me to private education because they couldn't afford it.
Yeah.
But I had this incredible opportunity, and it probably did shape my life because it made me also realize how important education is. And part of my mission in education is to give everyone that same chance. But as a single financial bit, like to get 120K equivalent scholarship, that is a big financial deal.
And how did you find schooling in Eton?
Oh my God, I got to tell you. So in East London, the cool kids, maybe now not so much, but they'd wear like Reebok, Adidas, Kappa.
Yeah.
I remember when I told my parents, I'm going to Eton, I got to look good. And they're like, oh, we can't really afford this. But they borrowed some money from relatives and bought me some like cool Adidas, Nike. I turned up the first day with a baseball cap and cool Kappa. And the kids are like, at Eton, is this like the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air? Because I was like, oh, they wear like Ralph Lauren and stuff.
Obviously.
I know, but I thought I was literally like Will Smith, turning up, hey guys.
Like thinking you were it.
Yeah. I mean, I slowly adjusted, but I still retain my East London sense.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm sure it would have been a shock at first, but like you said, I'm glad you adjusted, you got used to it, and I mean, you're still smiling about it. So it must have been a really good like experience.
Yeah, I think the main difference was obviously people ethnically were very different. So I grew up in East London, went to a Catholic state school where we had lots of Ghanaians and Nigerians, a lot of Filipinos, some Eastern Europeans, some white British, some Irish Catholics.
Wow.
So a lot. So yeah, it's quite a diverse melting pot. Eton at the time is more diverse now, but back around the early 2000s, it was predominantly upper middle class white people from Britain. So some people thought I was related to Gandhi. Because they're like, I know. They're like, you must be. I'm like, honestly, I'm not.
That says a lot, doesn't it? But moving swiftly on, I guess looking back on like growing up now, what would you say would be one piece of financial advice you'd give your younger self?
I would tell people to save little and often. Because financial habits, our attitudes towards money can form as early as age 7. I think Cambridge University's research a few years ago, and it's quite established now.
Yeah.
So I would tell people, whether you're like in primary school or secondary or sixth form, is a little and often that compounds. And in school we learn about compound interest. We think, oh, when is it ever useful? But actually with savings, £5 a month, £10 a month, over time, that becomes like a snowball. And the reason why it's important is saving early on, and I did when I was very young, it gives you the financial freedom to do things. Yeah. And for me, I've always valued spending money on people and experiences, people that you love and care about, and experiences, because things are nice. Again, when I worked in banking in my 20s, I did buy the odd nice thing, but the pleasure you gain diminishes very quickly.
Yeah.
But spending on other people, whether it's like taking them out, going for dinner with them, buying them a lovely gift, that stays with you. And experience are things that you remember a long time. So actually, so that's why saving little and often can give you the lifestyle that you want.
Facts. And I think it's really important that we can apply that to like saving and also investing, because again, I think a lot of people still assume that to invest you have to have thousands of pounds, whereas my sister now invests £50 a month, and even like she got a dividend the other day. She's like, oh my gosh, Yola. And I was like, see, I told you it adds up. And I think that mindset is so important. And I wish I actually realised that when I was younger a lot sooner as well.
Yes, people often think, oh, only the rich can invest. But not all, but many of the rich are rich because they invested early on. And that multiplier effect over time.
Exactly. No, I love that piece of advice. Thank you, Bobby. And obviously, like I mentioned today, we are here to chat all about the single tax, being single. I think I've been single for like 6-7 years now. So it's been a long time. Oh, okay. I can't complain. So I guess for those listening who may be single, what actually is the single tax?
So there's a really great quote by an American founding father, and he's apparently discovered lightning, and Benjamin Franklin.
Yes.
Yeah, and if anyone knows a $100 bill, I think it's called a Benjamin because his face is in the back of it. And he said this quote, in life, nothing is certain except death and taxes.
Okay.
Had he been around 250 years later, he would say death, taxes, and the single tax. So this is not like officially recognized by HMRC and the government. They're not like, oh, we have the single tax measurement bill.
Yeah.
There isn't. All it is it's the higher cost of living for a single person compared to the equivalent person who lives with a partner. And this can be things like your housing, utilities, food bills, subscriptions, all these costs that you might share with someone, but because you're a singleton, you bear it all yourself. And actually in the UK, by just before 2040, there are estimates there will be 11 million people who are going to be living in a single person household. So the single tax is actually a serious thing. So it's almost like, I almost say normal taxes get collected either at source or you pay at the end of the year. There's almost like a penalty on people living as singletons.
100%. Yeah. And you know what? I live at home with my mum, so I don't feel it too badly. But like you mentioned, there's going to be so many more of us living on our own. And it's expensive. So how much more does it actually cost us to be single in the UK, roughly?
So on this question, different organizations give different amounts, obviously different countries, different ones. But Hargreaves Lansdown, so they're like, I think they financial advisor.
Yes.
Investment platform. They did research in 2023 and they estimated it to be per month, a singleton will spend £860 more.
Wow.
And that works out over a year, just over 10 grand. Just over 10 grand. There are other estimates which are lower, 3-4 grand, but that shows you the scale. And actually, that's higher if you live in the big cities. If you live in Birmingham, Manchester, if you live in London in particular, with your renting costs and transport costs, things that you can't share with someone else. So you're looking at potentially 10 plus, probably more in the major cities of being single.
It's a lot. How do you find living alone, single in the UK? Do you find it expensive?
So yes and no. And I tell you, yes, because of course it hits my accounts each month.
Yeah.
But ever since I was young, in my gap year 18, so before I went to uni, I had a gap year where I worked for KPMG for 9 months. So I earned income. So ever since 18, I had money to spend.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean I always spent it, but it meant that I saved. So I've been in a lucky position where I've never felt as pressured, but I can definitely see like all my rent, my mortgage, my water bills, all these things are not getting split.
Yeah.
So that's extra money that I could have for spending on other people in my family.
Yeah. And it's hard because I think I realised the biggest impact of the single tax on me was last year when I actually wanted to buy my very first flat. And I got a mortgage in principle and I was like, okay, I'm actually really ready to buy my first home. So we were looking at flats and I knew what my budget was and I was like, okay, cool. Okay, so this was how much I'll pay on my mortgage. This is how much I'll pay on my service charge, how much I'll pay on my ground rent. But then I still had to pay council tax, water, electricity, gas. And I think it ended up coming up to like around £2,000 if I wanted to live on my own in a 1-bedroom flat. And I was just like, if I had a partner, that is easily £1,000 each. But because it's me on my own, and I was like to my mum, I was like, I don't think I'm ready to buy a house yet. Like it was just too much.
It just totally changed the way people approach making big life decisions.
Yes.
And I think this is also a sign of the times because if you look at 20, 30 years ago, if you look at the ratio between house properties and costing and average salaries, the ratio may have been 4-5.
Yeah.
Whereas now it's like 10, 15, 20, depending on the city. So actually 20, 30 years ago, singletons, the single tax would have been a much smaller percentage of income.
Yeah.
Whereas now it's grown. And to be honest, I think there's a big global issue. The single tax is impacting people in America, East Asia, everywhere you look across the world. And if you look, global rates of when people get settled down, number of children people have. In the UK now it's 1.4 children per family and replacement rates like 2.1, 2.2. So we're going to shrink 30% in a generation. And the single tax is playing a big part of this. I think the government really needs to wake up. If you're listening, government, wake up and listen. There are people out there that are paying the single tax. You've got to sort this out.
No, it's so true. And obviously, Bobby, I'm keen to know from you, what are some of the biggest hidden costs that single people face that often go unnoticed?
So whilst we have mentioned the housing, I think it's hidden in the sense that people often don't think when they're like, oh, they've left uni, they've got a job, I'm going to go and get a place. And then, as you mentioned, they suddenly get like the contract, they see the deposit, like 10 grand deposit, 20 grand deposit, whatever it is. With someone else, it's immediately halved. So I think it's that living cost is always the biggest one. And again, I think in New York City, the single tax, I think is, again, dollar conversion, I think it's like $40,000. So I looked up single taxes across the world. So America, thank God we don't live in New York. London's bad, but New York is worse. But other things are like, if you are a fan of watching streaming services, your Netflix, your Disney Plus, if you're watching by yourself, it's like Netflix and chill by yourself. You're still paying whatever 10, 15 quid a month. Whereas if you've got someone else, immediately it's cut in half.
Yeah.
But also, this is sort of a genuinely hidden one is, if you're thinking about your friends and you're being invited to things like birthday parties or weddings, if you're going as a couple, and I was in a relationship in my 20s, we'd always like, if we're buying them a gift, that cost is split in half. If we're taking a car there, the cost is split in half. And also, like, I get invited to like baby showers.
Yep.
And I've not had a baby shower. I've not had a wedding, so I've not had these gifts come back in turn.
Yeah.
So as a singleton, you're spending all these costs on your friends, which obviously you're going to do anyway.
Yeah.
But you don't get it back until you get into a relationship.
And it's so true. I'm so glad you brought up the topic of weddings. So I was actually with friends for dinner last night, and one of my friends is very excitingly getting married next year. And yeah, I've got 3 weddings abroad next year, plus 1 this year. And yeah, if I had a partner, I could split, my accommodation fees.
Yeah.
I could split the taxi from the airport. Oh no, but because it's me, myself and I would never miss my friends' weddings.
Of course not.
Ever, because I can't wait to celebrate it with them. But I'm conscious of the fact that the accommodation is going to cost me double because
Yes.
I'm on my own. It's really hard, isn't it?
I've had that. Like recently, I went to a wedding up in Scotland. Beautiful, gorgeous wedding. But I had a little, like, tiny little room in a corner by the stairs where everyone's walking. You hear the sounds up and down. And had I been in a pair, I could have got a better room, but not a double the cost, probably like 30-40% extra.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, you do feel those decisions. Again, like simple things like you're going to the airport. With someone else, you're like, oh, we'll get the taxi,
Yep.
half cost. By yourself, you're like, oh, no.
I'll go on the bus.
But also one thing, again, this is a real hidden cost, the emotional burden.
Yeah.
Because if you're a singleton, all these big financial decisions and also life decisions, you're taking by yourself. Obviously, if we're lucky enough to have parents, siblings, you talk to them, but it is different with a romantic other half where you can have those conversations without annoying them. Whereas with your mum or dad, and my dad sometimes like, Bobby, make that decision yourself. And mum's like, Bobby, come on, ask ChatGPT. So I think that emotional burden can be shared with someone else, especially big financial decisions like, do I go and do a master's? Do I go and change jobs? All those things with financial impacts with someone else, it's like, a problem shared is a problem halved.
Facts. And you know what? Clicks to that. Because I think, like you said, for me, like, I'm nearly 30. I mean, I still got a few years, but I'm
You know what?
30.
That's just not possible.
I'll take the compliment, Bobby. I'll take the compliment. Thank you. And yeah, I think now it's like, I want to really plan for my future, but I feel like it's really hard to do that when you are single, because I want to move out of my family home, but the financials just don't make sense because I'm going to be living on my own and the cost is double. Or I might want to move abroad, but do I want to move abroad when I'm single? Because I'm like, what if my future husband might be in the UK, not in Bali where I want to move to? I just feel like it's very hard to see what your actual future looks like when you are single, and I'm sure other people listening to the podcast probably can relate. Do you?
And to be honest, even when you're talking about buying that first property, the average age of people buying their first property in big cities is now anywhere between 34 to 37.
Yes.
It's just going up and up. And again, this is actually the singles tax can sound funny to our friends in long-term relationships, but this is going to cause a major demographic issue because if people are settling down later, they're marrying later, they'll have kids later, we have fewer kids. So, our pension pots in the future, who's going to pay for that? Who's going to pay for looking after elderly? So
it's a lot to consider.
It's a big issue,
there?
yeah.
And I guess with that being said, do you think the country is biased towards couples?
I think Western society has been set up for this sort of nuclear unit. Obviously, there are couples in different non-heteronormative relationships, but like society is like historically meant to be like, oh, there's a husband who work, a wife that used to be at home, two or three children, and obviously that dynamic's now changing. The wage gap is closing, but it's still based on people living together as a pair. And then you think about tax breaks, think about child benefits. Society doesn't just seem to be set up for singletons. And I think it's because before, when things were cheaper, it was almost like even if you're a singleton, it wouldn't impact you too much.
Yeah.
Whereas now it's just such a burden.
So expensive.
And again, all the housing, the utilities, even things like joint bank accounts, mortgage costs. If you've got a larger deposit, it reduces the amount you've got to pay in your interest. Even insurance deals. If you're buying a car insurance, if you've got another additional person named on your policy, the costs come down. I think some insurance companies think that people in couples are safer than people with singletons.
It's weird.
Yeah, no. Why
weird.
did you?
Why am I getting penalised?
Just for being just make up you're in a relationship. Yeah, I'm married, but I haven't seen her for like a long time.
It's crazy. And you know what? I'm laughing, but I know for me it's actually been It's not been easy, and I am fortunate I live at home, so I dread to think how people who are single and are parents who also have to go through this. So what tips do you have to help those maybe, I guess, navigating single life on their own with or without children?
So what I would say is that budgeting is always important, but it's even more important if you're a singleton. And the reason is people in pairs, if something goes financially awry for one person, let's say they lose a job, made redundant, or they've been told their role's being compromised, so they've got to take fewer days in the office or whatever it is, the other person can absorb the loss. Again,
yes,
they can be an emotional support, but also they can take some additional hours or dip into their savings to support you. So budgeting is so crucial then. But also, like, I would say building up an emergency fund for yourself.
Yep.
To be honest, even for people in couples, I would say, I always tell my friends if they're getting married, male or female, have a little emergency pot for yourself. Because obviously, I hope your wedding marriage goes so well, but you just never know what happens in life. If things go wrong, you need to have a little pot for yourself, just for yourself, so you can take care of things if things get
tight.
Get tight. Other things I would say about, are there ways you can share costs with friends and family? So things like your streaming, your Netflix, Disney Plus. There are, the household is not necessarily your physical household. It can be other people in your friends' network. So do try and team up, pair up with them. And even things like gym membership. Sometimes like there are gyms where you can share costs. There are gyms where you can get guest passes. So I think it's about having a good group of friends as well.
Yes.
And again, if you're going to a wedding, in theory, is there a friend on the same flight as you can share a taxi with? So it requires more planning, because people in a relationship, they just, while they're watching,
they sit back and enjoy it. They don't have to think about anything, do they?
And actually, one of the hidden costs I just realized is, if you're in a relationship, you don't have to go all the time. You can sit at home, like going out is sitting and watching something, getting a takeaway. Where if you're single, you're constantly going out with your friends, doing social events, paying money. And also because you want to meet someone, eventually, you got to be out there. You can't just be sitting on your home on your sofa.
True. It's so true. You know what? I didn't even think about that. The amount of times I've spent in the last year, I think, going out on dates to meet someone, like the makeup, the new outfit, the drinks.
The makeup, also, I'm going to go props to the women out there, because I never really thought about that until maybe the last couple of years. I saw on Instagram, like a few ladies are doing their get ready with me. And they were saying, guys don't realize how much also you got to do your hair and all the nails, and blokes, we just like put on a nice shirt, put on some cologne, but so we appreciate it, ladies.
Yeah, or the taxi home.
Yes, of course.
Past midnight, you don't want to get on the tube on your. So many costs of being single. So I appreciate those tips, and I think also it's really important that people take advantage of tax breaks if they can. Are there any schemes or discounts to help people living alone in the UK?
So I would say that probably the most important one is the council tax discount. So whatever your rate is, a singleton can apply for 25% off.
Okay.
Which is good. The only thing is, it seems a bit unfair, because in theory, mathematically, it should be you get 50% off.
100%.
So I don't know how this government's coming with, you're single, so therefore you only use 3. Where's that maths? Like, honestly, that is just a nonsense number, but at least it's something.
Yeah.
Also, like, think about times where you don't have to necessarily be in a romantic relationship. So like, there's like 2-for-1 rail travel, as long as it's with a friend. Although the only caveat with that is you got to travel from the same destination.
Okay.
So if you're picking someone up along the way, it might be complicated, but there are deals like that. I know some gyms offer like single memberships or like a single person discount.
Okay.
So always ask organizations, can you do a discount because I'm single? Most of the time they'll say no, but you never know. Someone might go, actually, we'll give you 10% off.
Yeah, maybe ask on Valentine's Day.
Oh, that's such a good idea.
That's where we get all the pity, don't we?
That's such a good idea. And also, Valentine's Day, M&S does this like £10 meal for 2. What about the £5 meal for 1? They don't do that. That's like £8-9. But the meal for 2 is £10. Come on, M&S.
Just get penalised. It's so bad. But you know what? Like you just said, is try not to think about always having to be in a romantic relationship to take advantage of discounts. So like you mentioned, friends, if you have like, discounts for like going to the gym in pairs. I know that is often a thing in many gyms. The 2-for-1 rail card, if you're living with a friend, again, that's something you can do, because I know me and my friends often like to do like city breaks. So if we're going to the same locations, we can share that kind of rail card. So I think that's really, really clever. And I guess, Bobby, to round up this podcast, do you have any final top tips to anyone kind of listening to the podcast that hopefully because we've made light of the situation, it isn't feeling too disheartened, but if they are feeling disheartened about their situation, do you have any final top tips?
So I'm going to start with a quote from a Charles Dickens book. He wrote
Okay.
Oliver Twist, but the book is David Copperfield, written in 1850. And this quote is called the Micawber Principle by the character. And he said, annual income £20, expenditure 1950, result happiness. Annual income £20, expenditure 2050, result misery. And all it's simply saying is that if your income is greater than your expenditure, you'll be okay. Yeah, your expenses are higher than your income.
Yes.
Then it's going to be misery. You can obviously borrow in the short term. And I would say, think about it's really basic, but think about your income and expenses. For your income, with your work, can you try and get small little increases?
Yeah.
Like, I know it's tricky in these economic times, especially with inflation, but ask your boss, your manager, if you're managing your own workload, speak to your clients, can you get an extra $5, $10, whatever it is, but those things add up, so that over time can make an impact. And with your expenses, if you've got debt, I always tell people, and again, this is like a Martin Lewis classic tip, always look at your highest cost of debt. If you've borrowed something on credit card, pay off your most expensive debt first, because that is like, you could do all the clever saving you want, but debt is often much more expensive. So think about little ways of asking for more money in work, and then think about your highest paying debt.
Oh, no, those were perfect tips, I guess, to round off the podcast, Bobby. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure talking to you. You know what? Speaking to you, I feel a little bit less riled up about the fact that I'm still single.
Yeah.
You never know. In a year's time, we might both be in relationships. We might be happily
And
married.
we'll come back and do a
You never know.
podcast about the financial benefits of being in a relationship.
I would love
that. Actually would be a great podcast.
That would be a good one, wouldn't it? But I guess, Bobby, before I let you go, what is next for you? Because I feel like there's loads going on.
Yeah, so, gosh, it's so hard to pinpoint one thing, but...
That encapsulates your life.
I know. So, but the thing that I'm working on is now... let me address what the problem is. So, a lot of people, when they leave school, they often say, the thing they'd wish they'd learned is financial education. Because schools don't do that. There are many decent textbooks, which schools do force on children. But what children read, I know as a teacher, they love graphic novels.
Okay.
So I'm trying to combine a graphic novel with a time-traveling adventure through time, where kids learn about money, but not because, it's about money education, but it's like, okay, I'll give you a little hint. So potentially it could be called Mr. Seagull's Time Travels. Okay. And each book is set in a different era. So 1920s Wall Street, 1690s and Britain and their wars. Or it could be Aztec civilization and the Spanish conquistadors. But each book... me and an assistant will travel through time, potentially in a giant ATM machine.
Okay.
And then we'll go like on a Doctor Who style adventure, but the kids are following a adventure where there's like economics, money. We're going to Wall Street in the 1920s, getting involved, like a Great Gatsby style, buying stocks and shares. A depression happens, crash happens. So the purpose is kids will be reading a book purely for the adventure, but actually they're educating themselves about money and business and finance. So that's like the next big thing I'm working on.
That sounds so exciting. It's giving like Biff, Chip and Kipper vibes.
Yeah,
do you remember those books?
my
Like
God,
The Magic Key?
I've not heard about that. Yeah, quite literally, yeah.
Oh my gosh, I'm very excited to
that's a
take
big
stock
project,
of that when it comes out.
Yeah.
So guys, keep your eyes peeled. And Bobby, as well, before I let you go, if anyone would like to follow you, see what you're getting up to, where can they go to follow you?
So social media now. If you switch on your telly, either BBC, Good Morning Britain, Channel 5, I'm probably on there most other days. But social media at Bobby_Seagull. Do you want to just look up all the there's so many platforms.
Oh, no.
There's Twitter or X, then there's Facebook for our mums' families, mums' people. There's LinkedIn, there's Instagram, there's TikTok, there's Blue Sky, there's Threads, and there's YouTube. Oh, there's so many things. You know what? It's actually a headache.
Bobby, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. I will come back when I've got a relationship and we'll talk about the benefits of being in a financial relationship.
I love that.